Well, this is a tough one because this is legitimately a great episode. Many great things about it, a few weak choices here and there. Not enough to derail the cumulative great effect. I really can't give it a grade. It's in kind of 8 to 9 territory, but it's not 9 to 10 because they do make a few small errors here and there, and those do add up. So, what is occurring? Well, essentially, after a very slow start, it's not that long, it's only like about 8 to 9 minutes, we get essentially two main narratives with Frankie and Caleb. I would say the Caleb one was slightly stronger, but essentially, the reason Frankie is a little ignorant or behind the times is it is explained, and the explanation makes sense, but it does force her to take a few stupid pills. But they're reasonable stupid pills. They're not annoying stupid pills like episode 5. They're just we're slowing down needlessly to pad out the plot. This did not feel like that at all. They utilized virtually every minute, every moment very effectively. But the Caleb story was a little bit better, except in one key scene where we have a good hero moment, but just the way it was shot and edited really deflated the moment, which was really shocking because it was very well built up and it was really stunning. It wasn't even predictable. So, a lot of great stuff within the middle section. Mathematically, you might say that's not really middle. I would say it has a slow start, 8 to 10 minutes, but then the middle section, about 30 minutes, was legitimately incredibly strong. And then it has a sort of clunky ending, but even the final sections were not that bad. A few minor mistakes, some of which are more performative, and you could go either way. I went negative. I appreciated in this episode we have a very strong Kubrickian influence. We have a lot of Clockwork Orange. We've got a lot of Full Metal Jacket. Even the episode title is basically taken from Eyes Wide Shut, as well as, of course, The Shining. So I appreciate the Kubrick influence, but I know that Kubrick does not work for everyone, so some people will be unduly negative. I can appreciate how the Nolans approached Kubrick. I did think, however, they took a little bit too much from M. Night Shyamalan at the beginning, but it's only a little. Of course, the Matrix influence is very strong, but surprisingly, it's more restrained this time, so I appreciated that. The good stuff is pretty good. The performances are pretty uniformly strong. It is a little surprising and shocking without spoiling that, and again, I can double check, but I don't think William or the Man in Black appear at all. Period. There's no Man in Black, which is, that's interesting. He's sort of a pretty rare exception here. I don't know why. You'd think he would show up for at least for a cameo, but I don't know. And one of the complaints I've had, and other people have had, that probably Tessa Thompson is the weak one. She was fairly strong here, and a lot of what Hale does makes sense, because really, a lot of her actions seem very contrived. But here, it made sense, it was reasonable, and the plots and twists and puzzles, for the most part, were reasonably mentally irritating, but they weren't mentally irritating in an annoyingly stupid way. They were like, oh, okay, that makes sense that certain things are left vague. Because a lot of things were very puzzling, especially with those desert rebels and Jay at the beginning. They resolved that. They finally resolved it. So a lot of questions people had, well, wait, why are people acting like this? Why is Frankie acting like this? Why is Jay the way he is? They do answer a lot of those plot gaps and plot holes. And they do it without creating new plot holes. But now we're going to get to the bad parts. There is a lot of the Batman. The whole Batman trilogy is really strongly present in this episode. Even a bit of Snyder with the Nightmare sequence in the Snyder Cut. And I do love Snyder, and I do appreciate Nolan, even when he's basically ripping off Kubrick, but here it felt a little inappropriate in two major areas. One of which is motivating Frankie. It is basically taken from Batman Begins. I don't want to specify, but when you see it in here, you're going to be like, oh, wow. Yeah, they basically just totally replayed Batman Begins. There's also a section with Caleb where, to me, it seemed he was doing, I'm not even joking, the Christian Bale voice from The Dark Knight. Now, I do respect Christian Bale. I want to get into acting myself. He's obviously very influential, so I don't know if this was a deliberate choice, but it felt really, really weird. It sounded, frankly, laughable. It made sense for the character to have that kind of voice, but it really was kind of like a parody of, "The city, thought you were alone, Tucker." And it was really, and it was just a little bit too on the nose for me. I think some people will really love the Batman Easter eggs and the Nolan Easter eggs and the Kubrick Easter eggs. I'm sort of divided. A lot of them were pretty good and strong. They didn't hurt the story, But in some places, they really kind of will pull you out of the episode. And it did for me at least. So overall, pretty good stuff, pretty good Easter eggs. The only probably major complaint I would have is these drone hosts. We'll call them White Walkers. The White Walkers have been radically inconsistent. I realize for the sake of the story, they have to be weak because if they're too strong, there's no rebellion. Hale will just win because they're too powerful. So I realize that. I just wish there was more consistency with their weaknesses. Why are the White Walkers at certain points too weak? Don't know. Why don't the White Walkers use the drones more effectively? Don't know that either. So essentially, we have a weak, slow start, a pretty strong middle section. I would call that middle section about 30 minutes. I know mathematically that might not make sense. And a fairly above average ending, but it is insanely predictable. And some moments are fairly cringe, and the dialogue is very derivative of Nolan's Batman series. But again, this is his brother. I would assume Christopher Nolan doesn't care or is kind of going to be touched by the homage, but at certain points I did think it undercut the story. Not too much, but it did get a bit too much towards the end, at least for me. So overall, very strong episode. It is 8 to 9 territory, but I do think they made some key mistakes in certain scenes and in certain choices. But overall, a very strong episode and definitely is making me excited for how they're going to end the story for this season.